Welcome to the show. I am Chris Graham. Got Rod Mullins here. We're going to talk some NASCAR news. And of course, we'll talk about the Southern 500 a little later. We're going to push that back, though, because one of our favorite people in all of NASCAR has some big news, Rod. Let's talk about Denny Hamlin. I'll say the name. JGR, Joe Gibbs Racing, announcing today a multi-year extension for Hamlin. I don't know. I mean, surprising news. He could have gone to his own race team. He decides to go to back with Joe Gibbs. What do you think of all this?
I wonder if there's a gag order in here, something that silences him for the rest of the multi-year. No, I don't know. It really didn't surprise me all that much. I think they were close to coming up with a solution to this contract thing. And, besides that, Denny Hamlin's kind of been the guy in the Joe Gibbs Racing stable that, probably more than anything else, pardon the pun, was more stable than anybody else. Kyle Busch, the situation happened with him, and it seemed like that they just didn't do a good job of negotiating whatsoever to try to keep him there. But I think it was also probably some other reasons too. And I think it was, losing the M&M's sponsorship. Kyle didn't really have a lot of favor with some people. For short, he just pissed some people off. And, when you're in one way hard, kind of a hard product to sell, it's going to be more difficult. And so you had these race car owners like Richard Childress, who was anxious to get a hold of this driver and mold him in such a way that he would be an effective driver almost immediately. And that's what he did. Denny Hamlin kind of brings some stability to this Joe Gibbs Racing organization that has seen the uproar here over the last couple of years. I think it was a big move by Joe Gibbs because he knows how important that he is. And hey, it also holds on to that Toyota sponsorship and that Toyota being able to work back and forth with 2311 Motorsports. It's a little bit surprising in one way that he decided to stay, but I think he's satisfied now that he's going to probably retire there at Joe Gibbs Racing and then be able to make the move on into ownership at 2311.
So here's a sort of a philosophical question, theoretical question. I don't know what it is,
Okay.
hypothetical. If you're Denny Hamlin, and you're your team co-owner and you're a driver, and you're a driver for a different team, why don't you take less money to drive for your own team or whatever you have to do? Because then you're driving. I mean, then you're both in one place instead of having to split loyalties. I don't know. I mean, I know this is unique to NASCAR. You'd never see this in any other sport, but maybe if you have any idea as to the thinking there or what the thinking might be, maybe help us think through that.
Well, it's kind of a tough one to actually, call on this. Is it good for NASCAR in such a way? Yeah, I guess so, because Brad Keselowski's kind of made the transition over to part ownership of RFK Racing. But, still, he's driving, but he's driving for his own race team. This is a different situation. This is Joe Gibbs Racing. This is 2311. We've got, separate entities, but they're joined at the hip, so to speak. That's about the best way I can say it. I guess if you get Denny Hamlin, you hold on to him, there's going to be an existence for 2311 Motorsports. Now, that's what I'm looking at. Philosophically, I don't know if it's a good move for him. I mean, I think in one way he probably would have been better off maybe going on to his own race team, but then Joe Gibbs could ill afford to lose him plus Toyota going to that race team, and then they switching over to, they will be the only, besides Legacy Motor Club next year, they'll be the only ones with, Toyota sponsorship. So it kind of solidifies that. It kind of keeps it in place. He's put himself in a position where I think he's got to perform and he's got to do well in order to carry over. But hey, what's to say here in the next couple of years that, this multi-year agreement that he's got, that he's signing, that there's some kind of stipulation, there's some kind of clause in it that allows him to step back and then quite possibly go into ownership. What he's doing right now, but Michael Jordan's kind of running things. But that split loyalty thing is rough. I just don't know how it pans out. I know Bubba Wallace has kind of made mention about it, about some things with, ownership, got to get out of the way for my part owner out of this as he runs down the track and so forth. It's a Pandora's box. That's about the best way I can say it.
It'd be a little different if Bubba was getting out of the way of his teammate and co-owner, our part owner, right? So
yeah, and I mean, even if he's trying to get a lap back on a particular part of the race, Bubba's racing.
Yeah.
Bubba's racing the same way that you've got the other drivers and so forth. Ty Gibbs, that's probably another thing right there that keeps that a little bit more solid in there. But who knows what's going to happen with Christopher Bell? We don't know what's going to happen with Christopher Bell. We know Martin Truex is going to come back, or at least that's the talk of it right now. He's coming back. So that kind of puts Ty Gibbs off another year. So we'll see how that goes in a couple of years when he decides to come finally leave. Martin Truex does. Does it open up for Ty Gibbs to go over to Joe Gibbs Racing? This has just been a proving ground for him. But, it's like I said, it's Pandora's box. I mean, you're kind of in a situation, if you're one of the drivers, if you're Tyler Reddick, Ty Gibbs, and also Bubba Wallace, you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't, is what ends up happening. If you try to win a race and you try to beat the boss out, you're damned if you do. Yeah. Then you go and then something happens and you wreck the boss or the boss wrecks you or something. You're damned if you don't. What do you do out of this whole situation? So, yeah, you've opened up that, and there's a lot of things to think about.
I'm trying to find a list, and I don't know how authoritative this is, but when you look at a list of the top 10 highest paid NASCAR drivers, because of course, they sign contracts. There were the terms of the deal, by the way, for Denny Hamlin, not revealed. So we don't,
right.
We heard multi-year extension. I'm assuming gobs of money. Before this extension, he was already the second highest paid driver behind right. Kyle Busch. So, and he was making $13.1 million a year. So I imagine it's the kind of thing where he probably was given an offer that, okay, I can either drive for my own team or I can right. take an obscene amount of money and continue with a team that I'm already very familiar with and feel very comfortable with. So, but that's got to be a hard choice on his part, because I think you laid it out well. It's got to be awkward for everybody involved.
Yeah, and here's another thing too that I just really came to me when we were talking about this a little more. We really don't know what the health status of Joe Gibbs Racing, Joe Gibbs, is altogether. I know that they have been probably one of the most successful race teams under his tutelage and the ownership there that he's had with it, but. And, Joe Gibbs is getting up there in age. I mean, he's probably in his 70s, I guess, or maybe close to 80, somewhere in that neighborhood. He's at the racetrack most of the time. But what if this opens the door up for him at one point to go and, say, I'm stepping away from the sport. And so I'm going to give the option for Denny Hamlin, in this case, with 2311 Motorsports, to buy in. Have a chance to buy into the race team and merge them together before it's over with. That could happen. Yeah. It just depends on what his health is. And I know that he's, it's like everybody else. We're not getting any younger, and he's definitely not. Although he is still, pretty fit for his age and so forth, gets around pretty good. But, I start wondering after a while, when's it going to be time? When's it going to be time for him to step away? Sort of like what happened with Richard Petty. Sort of, Richard Petty's 80, 81, somewhere in that neighborhood, or 84, somewhere, I believe, what he might be. And, he really can't represent the team as well as he used to. I mean, he travels, name recognition helps him a lot, but he really doesn't have a say in the race team, so to speak, because the times have changed. And I think that's what's going to happen eventually with Joe Gibbs, he knows the old way of how to race things, but Denny Hamlin's got that old version and also the new, where he kind of brings a new dimension to it, if that's what he ends up getting into.
I see here, Petty's 86 and
86. Whoa.
Gibbs is 82. So yeah, he's definitely he's no spring chicken either. None of us
Yeah.
are. He's certainly
Well, and Richard Childress, I know Richard Childress is up there too in age, and he's pretty fit also. I think, gosh, maybe mid to late 70s, I think, is Richard Childress. So you've got a lot of this old guard,
yeah
the old
70.
racing guard out there.
He's 77. Shoulders is
Okay. Well, you see, you got this old guard that's going to be changing.
yeah
It's changing right now before our eyes.
yeah.
And we're seeing the new generation of NASCAR is what we're seeing. And that's the influx of this young talent plus young owners coming in to state their, make their claim. Will we see Kevin Harvick quite possibly get into a race team? Don't think so. Not at this point. I think he's going to be quite satisfied with the racing deal and being in the booth for Fox for the next couple of years while he works there at the press box. He's awfully satisfied with his young son Keelan's racing career. He does a lot of open wheel, kind of small little midget race cars is what he specializes in. And so a lot of his time is spent with Keelan. This is going to kind of free him up to be able to spend more time with his son, but he's also going to be doing more broadcast. I don't see him getting into NASCAR ownership unless the opportunity presents itself. Who knows? I mean, I never would have thought that Dale Earnhardt Jr., Kevin Harvick, and some of the others got together and bought bought into partnership or whatever with the kart series. They bought this late model sportsman series that travels around mostly in the South. And I would have never thought about it. But Kevin Harvick's got a stake in that now. So could it be Dale Earnhardt Jr. and him get together eventually? I know they've had some problems. They've kind of worked through some problems, but it sets it up. Could he or could he not? We'll just have to wait and see.
Lots of good stuff on the back end of NASCAR there. I was just looking up what it costs to run a team. It's about $20 million a year to run a NASCAR team. I was trying to find what we could, if we had any numbers that we could access on what the most recent purchases of a new team, and I couldn't find anything there. But yeah, buying a new team. So I was thinking that in the context of all these drivers who are maybe aging to the point where they're going to retire from active racing, but are now getting ready to transition to the next stage, which could be buying or starting their own team. What it would take, and it takes some money. I mean, not only the $20 million maybe to buy the team, but then $400,000 per week is the estimated cost to run each race and be prepared. And you got to pay your driver, everything else. So if you want to, a really good driver, it's going to cost you more than $20 million per year, because I was giving those figures for what the top drivers make, and they're making over $10 million a year. So,
well, let's just say this: Justin Marks, when he got into the racing deal, he had some backing. He had some financial backing to help him get into trackhouse racing. And it definitely didn't hurt to get Pitbull's, input and love of NASCAR to kind of help him out a little bit. And it's kind of paid for itself, even though they've struggled at different times. And, look what they did. They took away a major sponsor out of Stewart-Haas Racing and Kevin Harvick's sponsor for 2024, and that's Busch Light or Busch Beer. So, it's changing. It's changing ever so much. And we're seeing more and more different kind of sponsors getting involved in this sport. So a lot of it is going to depend on the sponsorship, definitely going to depend on the economy and the way things go with the economy. I've mentioned this before. Win on Sunday, buy on Monday. Hey, that's out the door. You don't have that anymore. It doesn't exist.
looks like charters are now going for $20 million. So and then on top of that, you have to have your infrastructure. So yeah, it's a business. It's an expensive business, and then you got to find your sponsors. You got to have success, all that fun stuff out on the track. So hey, speaking of success on the track, let's review that first playoff race down at Darlington, Southern 500. And we have our first winner in the playoffs who will advance to the next round, Kyle Larson, coming away with the win. he had success in one sense. He'd been pretty successful in terms of having lots of laps led in previous races in Darlington. He just never won one. He never led the last lap. He finally led the last lap. Actually, led the last 55 laps. So nice win for him. Nice way to finish the race out. Denny Hamlin, frustrating day for him because he led the most laps on the day, but he had a couple of technical issues on back-to-back laps. So Larson punches his ticket to the next round.
He does, and he does so, I think, in kind of convincing fashion. The way he did it, he kind of just was hanging around right there till the very end. It wasn't a thing of charging up through there to try to go ahead and try to push somebody out of the way. He was patient, and I think that's what got him the win. I think more than anything else. But you go back through the field, and disappointing day for Denny Hamlin, like we already mentioned. You mentioned it. But for some of the other drivers, some of them had some good races. Hey, this points thing, this changed everything. Kevin Harvick was up there, top 10, I think is what he was before. Now he's down to something like 12th or 13th, somewhere in that part of the list.
I see him at 14th now. Yeah.
14th. Okay. Yeah. So I was close. I mean, I knew that it had demoted him, so to speak, down in the list. And some of the other drivers, it did too. I think Martin Truex kind of got bumped down a couple of notches there also. But you had Kyle Larson immediately goes to the top of the pack. William Byron is still hanging around there because of the wins and so forth. But this thing is shuffling. It's constantly shuffling, and it's going to shuffle by the time they get to Kansas. This is the midway point before we get to the cutoff, which will be at Bristol in about another week. And so, some of these guys, the most bizarre thing I think that happened of the night was Alex Bowman and Daniel Suarez. They got in a wreck. Both of them were out of it. They were out of the playoff picture, but Alex Bowman was trying to drop to the lower part of the track. Then he comes back up. Daniel Suarez follows him. I know what Suarez was probably thinking, hey, I need some clean air. I'm trying to break this a little bit, but I'm staying with you. You're moving. We might be able to do something. And lo and behold, Suarez taps him. And, Alex Bowman wasn't too happy after the race. He just said, the 99, he says he does some stupid things. That's about all he said about it. But, he was right. Suarez was like, I wanted a position. I was looking for a position, and I didn't get the position. And so, he was in my way. So therefore, I'm going to go and do what I think is best for me and best for my team. And that's what he tried to do. And unfortunately, it resulted in both of those cars being knocked out of the thing completely.
So Kevin Harvick dropped a few spots, and he's on the wrong side of the line right now. Bubba Wallace moved up 3 spots. He's still not on the right side of the line as far as top 12 goes to get to the second round, but he moved up to 13th, and he's 1 point behind Christopher Bell, who's in 12th. Joey Logano is at 20-33, 3 points ahead of Wallace, 2 points ahead of the cut line. And then there's a big jump up. Ross Chastain has a 10-point margin on those guys. Harvick is down in 14th. He's just a point behind Wallace, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. at 2027. He would be 4 points behind the line. So there's, what would that be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 racers within 5 drivers within 6 points of each other on either side of that cutoff line with 2 races to go. And there's some names there. There's some guys who, who've had success. There's Bubba Wallace, who's looking to have success for the first time. That should make for some interesting racing in the next couple of weeks.
Yep, it should. And, you've got the other thing, too, looking at it. One of the most recent winners, Michael McDowell, dropped him 19 points.
Oh, yes.
And then you've got Christopher Bell, who's currently in 12th and in that final transfer spot that he's got on points. So, if they have a bad race this coming weekend at Kansas, it could be that Michael McDowell is out. He could be out by the time he gets to Bristol and, further down the line if he doesn't finish the race. Christopher Bell could hold on and kind of hold there tight, kind of stay within that range. It's always funny watching the race, too, when they get there and you see 1 lap +5. Then you go -5 when somebody else swaps, taking over the position. And it's kind of interesting to see that. And that's what we're going to be seeing this coming weekend at Kansas. We'll definitely be seeing more of it when we go to Bristol. But Kansas, this is a racetrack that is some of the drivers it's been good for, especially as I look back on it, going back some of the dates here. Joe Nemechek won back in 2004. That was race number 30 on the schedule. Then you had Tony Stewart come in there, then Greg Biffle. That's some of the old names that we talk about sometimes with NASCAR. And then we get down through here. You see Kevin Harvick winning the race in 2013. Joey Logano dominated, took both races in October 2014 and 2015. Kevin Harvick came back, won that race. Martin Truex in 2017, he won that one. Chase Elliott only has one victory right now in racing at Kansas, but that was the one in 2018. Denny Hamlin won in 2019, but then you have Joey Logano, Kyle Larson, and Bubba Wallace last year. Now, if Bubba can win this one, if they can regain that magic, Bubba Wallace could be setting in a good position coming by the time that they get to Bristol. But he'll still have to race as hard as he can at Bristol in order to come away with a decent finish for that cutoff spot, because he can ill afford to have something happen to him at Kansas and also at the same time at Bristol.
Yeah, that's why I didn't even mention Michael McDowell's name. He finished 32nd in Darlington, right, and he is so far behind right now that he is definitely on watch for potentially just completely falling out of this before we even get to Bristol. And I know Bristol still, we have the Kansas race to go, but you'll be at Bristol. And I love the fact that you'll be able to be there for a cutoff race. That's just awesome. And and Bristol being a short track with a lot of banging and bumping and swapping paint and everything else. I mean, that's a perfect race to have as a playoff cutoff race.
Yeah, it is. Here's something else, Chris, too, that I pointed out, or I'm getting ready to point out to you, about clinching via points.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Some of these drivers, Tyler Reddick could only clinch with help. He has to have help in this. Now, the same point requirements would hold true if a new win comes from William Byron, Tyler Reddick, Chris Buescher, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex, Kyle Busch, Brad Keselowski, Ryan Blaney, Ross Chastain, or Joey Logano. Now, Keselowski doesn't have a win on the season, but he's higher up there in the points that could help out some other drivers down through here. Now, William Byron can clinch a spot with 53 points, 55 points if Reddick, Buescher, Hamlin, or Truex wins, and he needs help if Busch, Keselowski, Blaney, Chastain, or Logano win. That's the scenario we're facing here. Most of these drivers, Tyler Reddick, Buescher, Hamlin, Truex, Kyle Busch, all of those could clinch only with help. But if there's a new winner from Christopher Bell or another winless driver lower in the standings, still eligible to advance to the next round, the following drivers could clinch by being 56 points above the 10th winless driver in the standings. So any of these, Byron, Reddick, Buescher, Hamlin, Truex Jr., Busch, Keselowski, Blaney, Chastain, that's what it would take. And then you've got some people that could clinch only if they win. And these are the drivers that have already won. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that's going to happen with this shuffling back and forth that'll take place at Kansas and also at Bristol. And, I am looking forward to Bristol again. This is hopefully going to be a sellout race. Darlington was a sellout. They were talking about Darlington. They said, and the thing that kind of gets me too, NASCAR never really reveals, what their ticket sales, how many people were sitting there in the stands, but they'll, the track will say sellout. We had a sellout. Uh-huh. And that may be true. But, definitely, I think there's going to be some definite fan support when they go to Kansas. But I'd love to see Bristol filled to the brim, because I think it would just be one heck of a night to see this kind of race. And there's going to be a lot of beating and begging, like you said. There's going to be fighting for those playoff spots, and this is the cutoff. There's going to be some people that's going to go away empty-handed. They're going to be going away crying. They're going to be going away angry. Any way you look at it, it's going to be a tough night for some of these drivers.
That is Saturday, September 16th. We have to get through Sunday, September 10th, 3 p.m. start in
Right.
Kansas. It's the Hollywood Casino 400. But yeah, we got some stuff to look forward to here. And you definitely do. You get to go down to Bristol and catch it all there in person. So, well, Ron, we will break away. Thank you as always for your time and your insight.
Appreciate it. Hey, did you enjoy your trip to Nashville, by the way?
I did probably a little too much. I left here with a little bit of a cold, and I think just because
Oh, okay.
I was so busy down there, in addition to the football, which kicked off early in the day. I ran into, I caught up with a friend down there Friday night. He a local who's
Hmm.
gave me a great tour of the non-touristy places. We went to the Station Inn, a really vaunted bluegrass spot. Caught some music there, and drove up and down Music Row. Then on Saturday, actually, my wife texted me during the game and said that there was a singer that we had written about when she was a teenager who's from the Rockbridge County, Lexington area,
Right.
who
Hmm.
was singing at Alan Jackson's bar. But I had to get there. She was playing the afternoon shift, and she was going to be done by 6. So I wrote all my post game stories, hurried over there like a 1 mile walk from the stadium. Got to catch her for 45 minutes or so. Then I did a bar crawl until about midnight. I think between all of that, and the flying back and forth, I'm exhausted, and I think that the little bit of a touch of a cold that I had before this, my
Hmm.
immune system shot, and it finally caught up to me. So I earned what I've got here because I definitely had lots and lots of fun.
Well, I can say this: the Tennessee fans went easy on me this past week.
Yeah,
That's the
very
good
nice of
thing
them to
about
do
it.
so.
They went easy on me. I was kind of expecting. I said to one of the students the other day at school, they're a big Tennessee fan. And I said, hey, you didn't catch me bragging about Virginia. Virginia's going to do this and Virginia's going to do that. You didn't catch me doing anything like that. And she said, no, you're right. You didn't. I said, because I knew our tail was going to be whipped before we did anything else. But now, if I'd really wanted to go out on a limb,
Uh-huh.
I would have never in my wildest dreams ever thought of Duke beating Clemson the way that they
Oh
did.
no,
And
yeah.
there are people right now that they are loving this. I've got one student that's a big Duke fan. He says, just guess what? It's going to be whipping time when we have to face Virginia. And I said, hey, I'm not going to complain in football. Now, basketball, I might complain about, but still, Duke may be on the rise. They were, I think, in some of their games last year, but
They won
after this
9
big
games.
win,
Yeah,
wow.
they won 9 games last year, but they
Yeah.
came into this game with, oh well, that was last year. Maybe it was a fluke, and then they beat Clemson by 21.
Yeah.
Biggest game in school history, just because it was on the campus there at Duke. I've been to football games at Duke before, and it's a place that generally, I mean, even when I saw the Goodyear blimp shot, I assume it was a Goodyear
Mhm.
blimp shot over the stadium when early in the game, and you could see there was half the stadium was blue, half the stadium was orange. I mean, there were a lot of
Yeah.
Clemson folks who drove up from
Yeah.
South Carolina. Those folks weren't there in the second half as much because
Oh no, I saw a lot of empty seats over on the other sideline. I saw a lot of empty
yeah,
seats.
that wasn't Duke people leaving. That was all those Clemson people who's like, I can't believe we drove up here for this. So
Well,
tough night for them. Tough night for the ACC in one respect, just because Clemson national cachet. But Florida
right.
State, big win over
Oh yeah.
LSU,
Yeah.
dominant win over LSU. So they're number 4 in the country now. Duke is in the top 25. Tennessee moved up to number 9. I think having seen them in person now, they're pretty good. Yeah, college football has started, and it's a good time of year. When football's starting, NASCAR's in the playoffs, baseball's getting ready to head to their playoffs. It's a good time of year to be a sports fan.
Yeah, and if you're Brian Kelly, you learn not to put locker room fodder up on the wall and say, we are going to demolish, you know,
And now he's trying
Florida
to say he
State.
didn't say that. You got tape.
He's he's
It's
on
recorded.
he's on tape. He's quoted. So
Yeah, it's recorded.
yeah,
So yeah, that's all fun. Hey, this is a good time of year to be a sports fan. We're very lucky, and we're lucky to be able to do this. Well, Rod, again, thank you for your time. Look forward to talking again soon.
appreciate it, Chris. Thanks.